Hello everybody and welcome to Mortal Fury.
I'm Chris.
Glad you joined us this week. We're going to pick up and talk, go back to Judas. I can bring out some thoughts about that and encourage you to look at that story when you have time. It's fascinating. Thankfully, though, we see it all as good news from a great God that is molding us and working with His creation for a bigger plan. And we see that in these stories, even in the story of Judas. And that brings us a lot of peace. So I may just start off here and read some things to get us started that I found interesting. And this comes from a book from A. Enoch. Chris has been reading this book and talking about it too. It's a great book. We'll talk about that probably here in a minute. Let's see here. Let me find it. Okay. The God of Judas. The one that we love talking about here. This God that we think molds his vessels, and that's what Enoch says right here, who molds vessels, did not begin his work. This God didn't begin his work with Adam. And I think that's key. That gives us the thought there's a bigger plan going on.
Yeah.
That sometimes we don't see, because for us, it's Adam. It's us. It's humans or whatever. And this is so neat to think that it goes back before that. Adam, with his black burden of condemnation and death, is only a parenthesis in God's revelation. So Adam is not the alpha of God's ways.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And we must not make him the Omega. So then he goes on to say what we want to say, and this we can all find common ground with Judas in this. Judas was not only in Adam, but he was also in the beloved Son in creation. Okay? Judas. If we believe what Scripture says, and that's what Scripture says, that's the old Romans 5:18. Read that. For all of us, Romans 5:18. Consequently then, as it was through one offense for all mankind, for our condemnation, thus also it is through one just award for all mankind for life's justifying. For even as through the disobedience of the one man, that's Adam, the many were constituted sinners, that's all of us, okay, because we're all start in Adam, like I said. Thus also through the obedience of the one, that's Jesus Christ, the many shall be constituted just.
Yeah.
So that's Judas also.
Yep.
Okay, he was found in Adam. So we're going to bring out some points. Chris has got some beautiful points to bring out about this that may show how Judas was playing his role, and then maybe we'll show that would any of us done differently if we were chosen to play that role.
Yeah, there's Judas is one character that we're looking at, but the whole time I've been looking at Judas, others have been popping up in my mind who they themselves felt like probably they were on a mission, or they were fulfilling their volition, their will, and Dean and I are of the mind that all of that was laid out for them. Their days were formed even before there was one of them. There's a master plan that's being carried out, and we're going along believing in our mission, our whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, and somehow that we are masters of our domain, we are captains of our ship, and we're finding out with great peace that it's not that way at all. And it's really interesting. Judas has always been a character, even when I was a child, hearing about Judas, and I had certain people in my religious upbringing who were telling me about this horrible man, and it would have been better for him not to have been born, and all of these things about Judas, who betrayed not only Jesus but the other 11 disciples, and as I got older and was still in my Christian upbringing, I found a way to look at Judas. I think I started assimilating with Judas and thinking, I just had a heart for him. I just felt like when he saw what happened,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was what he thought was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think Judas was thinking, I'll put Jesus in front of these people and they'll see everything we saw. And they'll know this is the Messiah, and he'll bring about that millennial kingdom that much quicker, which is all the Jews are living for. That's all they want, is their kingdom. And then when it goes awry, the 30 pieces of silver falls pretty flat. And of course, we know Judas hangs himself. And I think that was a horrific, terrible, agonizing scene for Judas. So I actually hurt thinking about Judas. In listening, looking at some of these things, for one of the things that we looked up, scripture we looked up, and I want you to consider the position Judas finds himself in, just like that. He's at the table with the other 11 and Christ. John 13:27 says, Satan enters into Judas. Jesus turns to Judas and says, what you were about to do it quickly. Mm-hmm. All right, Satan just entered you.
Right.
And then the man you're following for 3.5 years, and you believe everything he's telling you. Mm-hmm. He tells you what you're about to do, go do it quickly.
Right, he's having those thoughts to do this.
Yeah.
And we turn that story into just, he's this betrayer and
this
selfish.
Maniacal.
And there's so much, there's no way that's it. Even if there's things in him, because it's in us all, because like I said, going back to the beginning here, we're all in that. We're all dying human beings because of that mortal, because of that sinning, missing. Mm-hmm. And so we all have that. So even if he has that, and we could give that to religion that teaches that.
Yeah.
There's no way when you look at that story, because go back in that time, we're hindsighting it. We see all of Paul's teachings and everything that happened. But at that time, before the cross, none of them knew that their Messiah, their teacher at the time, none of them knew he was going to the cross. They didn't believe that. Judas didn't know that. He didn't know he was sending him there. There's no way he could have known that. It's proven by what you just said. He was so crushed, it proves it.
Yeah.
What really happened? What did he really do? What did I really do?
What did I just do?
He didn't know he was doing that.
Yeah.
Playing that role.
Satan left him.
Yeah, he didn't know. There's no way
he was left with the results of his actions. And they didn't go the way he thought it would go. And then he recognized, I can't imagine how he felt about the other 11 disciples and what they were thinking about him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's brought to the point where he hangs himself, for crying out loud.
And so what any of us, to your point, we know, and Chris and I believe, well, if we were put in that situation, in those circumstances is what,
right?
If that was our life, we couldn't have.
How would we have
done any
different? Yeah.
We couldn't have done any different. That's such a different view than the way I was brought up to look at Judas. And to look at it in a way as an example to make sure you don't behave in that way and you behave in the right way. And it's so ridiculous. We all have similar, a different circumstance, obviously. Mm-hmm. We're not in that circumstance, but we wouldn't have. The point is we wouldn't have acted any different. I don't believe I would have acted any differently.
Right. And while we're looking at Judas this week, I go to this book, which is quickly becoming one of my favorites. The Problem of Evil and the Judgments of God by A. Enoch. You can get it at studyshelf.com. Concordant.org, I think, also is another place.
Good book.
Fantastic book.
Loaded.
I am really taking chapter by chapter and highlighting and looking at stuff. In this particular chapter, God's will and intention, it's become one of my favorites. I've read it 3 times now. And it is incredible the way this is laid out. Now, prior to this chapter, a couple before, is a whole chapter on Judas and how Judas couldn't do anything but carry out the plan of God, whether he recognized he was doing that or not. Obviously, I don't think he did. And in this book, God's will and intention is interesting. I want to read to you this passage that I highlighted. You think about this. Who has resisted his will we may answer many, if not all. But to the query or question, has anyone withstood his intention? The reply is the opposite, for no one can thwart him. Even when withstanding his will, we are fulfilling his intentions. So, see, this is, in my mind, this is kind of funny, and it may seem juvenile, but when we go to the bowling alley, I watch these kids go down to go bowl, and the people, the attendants there, pull up these bumper pads on the side, and these kids have a desire to roll a ball down there and knock down all those pins. And it bumps into this wall, and it moves the ball all the way over here, and it just guides the ball down there, to start knocking over pins. And in my head, I think of that, our lives are these moments where we are nudged along by our circumstances and stuff. We think we're in charge. We think we're making decisions and doing these things. And sometimes we even go, oh, I've strayed from God. I need to get back on this path. Obviously these things have happened because I'm over here and I probably should be over. All of this stuff that we think is going on, but we're being nudged along by these influences in our lives that do not, there's no way you're free of these experiences and these influences that are pushing you down the road of our lives. This is God moving his intentions for us into fullness, and we're just going along. Now, that's interesting to think about. Now, people sometimes reject that idea that that's what's going on, because then we're just a robot. We're just automation,
Right.
He had a little piece here on that I liked also. Too often we're told that if a man has no free will, he is a mere automation. This is a mistake. The so-called freedom consists merely in the lack of conscious coercion. Being ignorant of the constraining or restraining influences which determine his conduct, and altogether unaware of ulterior forces. He subconsciously yields at the very time that he imagines he is most independent. His freedom of will is simply ignorant, unconsciousness, or submission to environment or heredity.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. And what a beautiful answer to that automation thing.
It is.
Oftentimes in this particular chapter, Enoch goes to the example of Pharaoh and Moses. This is what I was talking about. This is we were talking about Judas, and then I'm thinking about Pharaoh as I read this book, this chapter. And I'm thinking about Pharaoh. Could he do anything other than what God was doing? For the first time in my life, Enoch put a new idea in my head that Pharaoh's heart had to be hardened in order for the fullness of what God was going to show through this scene of Moses and Pharaoh and the Israelites.
Yeah, for the plan to come together, right?
For the plan to come together, it required that God harden Pharaoh. So for the very first time, I was introduced to the idea that Pharaoh may not have been the hard-hearted person we thought he was. And he needed Pharaoh to do his part. I think that's interesting.